Let me tell you about a place nestled deep in the misty hills of eastern Africa, far from any village or town, hidden behind twisted acacia trees and rusted iron gates. It is called Marula Girls Academy, and it is not just any boarding school. This place carries a secret buried so deep, even the ancestors whisper warnings in the wind. The story begins with a girl named Amina, a bright 16-year-old from Nairobi. She had won a scholarship, one of only 5 granted each year, to attend Marula, a school whispered about in elite circles, rumored to create future queens, leaders, and legends. Her mother cried the day she left. Not tears of joy, but tears of dread, like her spirit knew something her mouth couldn't say. The gates creaked open on her arrival. The security guard didn't speak. He just stared, eyes hollow, unmoving. As the gates shut behind her, Amina felt a shift in the air, like stepping into another world. The school was beautiful, hauntingly so. Ivy clung to stone walls, bells chimed without wind, and the staff. Well, they smiled too much. Not warm smiles. Empty, stretched, too wide smiles that never quite reached their eyes. The rules were strange. No mirrors allowed. No one was to leave their dorms after midnight. And most terrifying of all, no one was allowed to leave the school grounds, not even during holidays. Why can't we leave? Amina once asked her roommate, Nia, a soft-spoken girl who'd been at Marula for 3 years. Nia flinched, eyes darting to the corners of the room like the walls were listening. Because the school won't let us. At first, Amina laughed it off. But then came the whispers. Whispers from the old chapel at night, whispers in the water pipes, whispers that knew her name. Then came the dreams of girls walking into the forest at night, eyes blank, lips stitched shut. Then, one evening, a girl named Zula decided to escape. She couldn't take it anymore. The rules, the visions, the eerie staff meetings where the girls were forced to chant in a language they didn't understand. She slipped out through a broken window and ran toward the forest, hoping to find the main road. She never made it. Manette. They found her body at sunrise, folded in half like a paper doll, eyes wide open, her mouth filled with soil. The school doctor said she died of a night fright, a rare panic condition. But Amina knew better, and so did Nia. We're not students here, Nia whispered one night under her blanket. Were offerings. Mina's stomach twisted. Offerings to what? And then Nia told her the truth. Decades ago, before the school was founded, the land was cursed. A great famine had struck the hills, and the villagers prayed to an ancient forest spirit known as Haskamolo. It promised to restore life and rain in exchange for one thing, souls. Young, bright, innocent souls, every generation the spirit demanded payment, or it would turn the hills to ash. So the elders built a school. Marula, a beautiful trap? A place to gather the best and brightest girls, feed them, teach them, prepare them. And then slowly let the spirit take them one by one. No one would question it, not when it looked like a prestigious academy. The girls who disappeared, a transfer they'd say, and moved abroad. Lies. Every one of them gone. Taken. Amina wanted to scream, to burn the place down, but she had to be smart. The spirit didn't take all at once. It was patient. It preferred fear. It fed on it. She and Nia began searching for answers. In the school's oldest library wing, behind shelves of dust-covered books, they found an ancient ledger. In it, names. Hundreds. All girls, all with the same final note beside their names. Harvested. That night, the chapel bell rang 12 times, but it wasn't midnight. It was 10 p.m. The staff marched through the halls, chanting. Amina knew the harvest had begun again. She grabbed Nia's hand. Now, or never. The two ran, dodging the prefects who now moved with gliding steps and no longer blinking. One girl who peeked through the keyhole claimed to see girls kneeling with eyes closed, chanting words that burned in her mind for days. She was found 3 days later, curled up in her bed, rocking back and forth with dirt under her fingernails and her tongue covered in blisters. Ew. She was transferred, they said. Every inch of the campus breathed secrets. The library, for example, had sections sealed with chains, sections the oldest students warned never to ask about. The gardens bloomed year-round, even in dry seasons, and not a single insect buzzed in the air. The food in the dining hall was always hot, always fresh, yet no deliveries were ever seen entering the school. The security guards at the front gate didn't speak. They didn't blink. They only stared, watching every movement like their souls had been emptied out and replaced with something ancient. But perhaps most disturbing of all was the silence. Not the ordinary kind, but a silence so deep that it seemed to press against your skull. The kind of silence that made your ears ring with phantom noises. A silence that seemed to listen more than it allowed anyone to speak. The girls would sometimes sit in common rooms with wide eyes, clutching one another's hands, too afraid to say the things they felt. The walls seemed to record conversations, and rumors spread that if you spoke ill of the school, something would visit you in your dreams. Time moved strangely within the gates. Some girls said they had been there a year, but felt like decades had passed. Others aged too fast, developing gray hairs before their 17th birthday. Shadows stretched at the wrong angles. Clocks ticked backward during certain nights. And sometimes the forest itself would seem to breathe, as if the trees leaned closer, watching, waiting. New arrivals always noticed the odd air first, the way their lungs felt heavier when they stepped onto campus. Birds refused to fly over the grounds. Animals never crossed the perimeter. Even the sun seemed reluctant to shine too brightly. Parents who dropped off their daughters left with unease in their bones, never quite understanding why they drove away with tears in their eyes, or why the radio went silent for 10 full minutes as they passed the final hill, till no one knew the full truth. Only that Marula was not simply a school. It was something else, something older, something that had been waiting, watching, feeding, and each girl who entered through those iron gates unknowingly walked into a story already written in blood and silence. Her name was Amina Wangaku, born in the heart of Nairobi, under the haze of city lights and the weight of expectation. She wasn't born into wealth, but her mind was sharp, her spirit even sharper. Amina had always been the girl who asked questions in classrooms where silence was rewarded. The one who read forbidden books under the covers long after lights out, the one who stared into the unknown and didn't flinch. Her mother called her Matoto wa Ipo, child of the wind, restless, curious, unafraid. It was this insatiable hunger to know more that marked her from the beginning. She had never heard of Marula Girls Academy until a woman in a green velvet dress appeared at her school, handing over a sealed envelope with a golden insignia no one recognized. Amina was the only student chosen from her entire district. The scholarship was full, the opportunity too great to refuse. Unforgettable. People in her neighborhood said she was blessed. Some said lucky. A few said she had been marked. Her mother, a deeply spiritual woman, grew quiet the moment she read the acceptance letter. She didn't smile. She didn't dance. Instead, she pulled Amina aside and whispered an old Kikuyu prayer, placing protective beads around her wrist. "Wear these always," she said. "And if anything whispers your name in the dark, do not answer. The journey to Marula was long, and Amina couldn't shake the unease that built with every kilometer they drove. Still, she carried herself with a quiet defiance. Unlike the other girls who clutched their suitcases and cried during their first night, Amina sat at her window, watching the moonlight shift strangely across the forest that surrounded the school. She was the observer, the listener, the one who didn't just accept but needed to understand. From the very beginning, she noticed things others ignored. The way the air thickened during morning assemblies, the way the staff tilted their heads when students walked by, as if measuring them for something unseen. She questioned everything. Why the library catalog didn't include books published after the 1980s, why the meals never repeated but always had the same taste, why none of the older students ever spoke about their first year, she asked. She watched. She remembered. Amina wasn't just clever. She was brave, but her bravery was quiet. It wasn't in grand speeches or rebellious tantrums. It was in how she dared to walk alone through the gardens after curfew, not to break rules, but to see what the night air whispered when no one was around. It was in how she read through the forbidden sections of the library by hiding pages inside her notebooks. It was in how she never let her fear close her eyes, even when the shadows seemed to move on their own. There was a strength in her that didn't come from muscle or pride, but from knowing who she was, even when the world around her tried to erase that. She began keeping a journal, documenting everything: strange rituals, girls who vanished without warning, symbols carved into the stone walls behind old paintings, the hum that came from beneath the floors during thunder. Every word she wrote was a small act of rebellion against the silence Marula demanded. She made friends but kept her heart guarded. And among them, Nia became closest, meek, quiet, but with eyes that held knowledge too old for her age. It was Nia who first hinted at the truth, trusting Amina in a way she hadn't trusted anyone else. Something about Amina's presence calmed the others. She was the kind of girl who seemed destined to unravel mysteries, not for glory, but because she could not live without truth. The other students began to lean toward her when strange things happened, doors that locked themselves, dreams that all the girls shared on the same night, candles that lit with no fire. They turned to Amina. She became the center of a circle she never asked for, a reluctant leader in a school where leadership meant danger. But what made Amina truly chosen wasn't just her intelligence or intuition. It was something deeper. The spirit of Marula, the one buried beneath the roots of the school, noticed her. Where other girls were terrified, Amina stood still. Where others begged to forget, Amina demanded to remember. The presence in the school watched her, not with hunger, but with recognition, as if it knew her, as if it had been waiting. There were nights when she'd wake up with ancient words carved into her skin, faint and glowing, fading by sunrise. She began to dream not of fear, but of fire, burning walls of screaming spirits, of gates shattering under invisible hands. She began to hear things, whispers not meant to haunt, but to guide. She was different, not just a student, not just a girl. She was the one the school could not consume without consequence. Even as the rituals intensified, as more students vanished, as the staff's smiles grew sharper and the air thickened with the scent of earth and blood, Amina did not falter. She pieced together the truth from ruins and riddles. She stared into the past until it blinked first. She carried the names of the lost in her notebook and vowed to speak them back into existence. The darkness around Marula deepened. But Amina did not run. She prepared. She listened. She waited. She waited. Because she understood now, there was no one coming to save them. No parent, no government, no priest. It had to be someone inside, someone who knew the corridors and the lies, someone who had seen the spirit's face and still dared to speak. And that someone, for reasons she was only beginning to understand, was her. It began with the empty beds. No alarms, no screams, just silence where laughter had once lived. The first girl to vanish was named Sophia. She was known for her loud voice and sharper tongue, a girl who rarely followed the rules and always questioned the strange customs of Marula Girls' Academy. One evening, she was seen during supper, sitting near the edge of the dining hall with a half smile and a plate of steaming ugali. By morning, her bed was perfectly made, her belongings untouched. But she was gone. Not a note, not a sign, not a single thread left behind. The official word from the school was simple: transferred to another institution for behavioral alignment. But the girls knew better. Sophia had no relatives, no backup school, no warning. Scuff. The transfer story sounded neat, too neat, like it had been rehearsed 100 times before being delivered by Madame Kalunda with her signature plastic smile. Then came Zuri 2 weeks later, followed by Amina, then Makina, each disappearance spaced just far enough apart to make it seem like coincidence, but close enough to feel like the rhythm of something ancient. A slow, steady pulse of vanishing lives. The older girls whispered that this had been happening for years, that every class that graduated left behind 1 or 2 fewer names than they arrived with. And those names? Erased. Photos removed. Bed tags gone. Class records rewritten. There were strange patterns if one dared to look. Most of the missing girls had traits in common: intelligent, rebellious, emotionally strong. They were never the meek or silent ones. It was almost as if the school, or something behind its walls, selected them, like it was searching for a particular kind of soul. Amina began to notice more. The strange glances shared between teachers when a name was called in roll and no one answered. The way staff members would suddenly change topic, pretend the girl never existed, and even warn others not to linger on the past. When one student, a girl named Ediz, dared to demand answers in front of the entire class, her mouth began bleeding as she spoke, her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed. She was gone the next morning, her bed stripped clean. No one dared to ask again. The worst part was how the disappearances became normalized. The fear had rooted itself so deeply that students began to grieve in silence. No mourning, no weeping, just lowered eyes and clenched jaws. The common rooms grew quieter. The laughter dimmed. Friendships became cautious and brittle because no one knew who might be next or who might already be watching. Some students claimed to see things before a girl vanished, a shadow behind them that didn't belong. Footsteps in the night outside their dorm room, but no one was there. A knock at the window from the 3rd floor. Strange dreams where the missing girls called their names from beyond the trees. their mouths open but voiceless, their eyes full of pleading terror. One girl, Nuru, awoke screaming that she saw Sophia in the garden, half-buried hands reaching out as if pulled by vines. She was sedated and moved to the infirmary. She never came back. Then there were the journals, bits of them found tucked behind books in the library, scrawled under loose floorboards, slipped into textbooks. Notes from the vanished girls. Frantic, broken, half-finished entries that spoke of the hunger under the floor, the woman with two faces, of the blood moon that rises on no calendar. Amina began collecting them in secret, piecing together a chilling pattern. Every disappearance aligned with a specific phase of the moon. Every girl had confessed to strange visions before being taken. Every girl had heard the same song in their dreams, a haunting, wordless melody that made them wake with tears. Security around the school tightened in ways that felt more ceremonial than protective. Curfews grew stricter, doors began locking automatically. The gardens were fenced off. Candles were now placed in each hallway, not for light, but for something older, something ritualistic. The chapel bell rang more frequently at night, and the teachers seemed more distant, more distracted, as if preparing for something unseen but inevitable. And still, the girls kept disappearing. One night, Amina discovered a secret tunnel beneath the laundry room. Inside, the walls were lined with old, decaying uniforms and notebooks with names that matched no one on the current student roster. She found a rusted board with dozens of names carved into it, names that had been scratched out one by one, leaving only deep gouges in the wood. Tet. She realized then that the disappearances weren't isolated. They were a ritual, a cycle. What chilled her most was the realization that not all the staff were unaware. Some of them knew, some of them watched, and some of them helped. Not every girl was taken violently. Some walked willingly. As if called by something, their eyes blank, their feet bare, their bodies light like leaves carried by wind. Amina once saw a girl walk straight into the forest at dawn, wearing nothing but her nightgown. No one stopped her. No one followed. The girls left behind began living in a state of muted dread. Each new student arrival was watched with a strange tension. Would she be the next? Could she be the one to end it all? And meanwhile, the missing were never spoken of again. Their photos erased, lockers reassigned, their very existence rewritten. But Amina couldn't forget. Every girl had a face, a laugh, a story, and they were still there, somehow lingering just beyond the veil of waking life, calling out, begging not to be forgotten. Long before Marula Girls Academy ever stood in its current form, before the walls rose, before the bells rang, before the laughter of students ever echoed through its stone corridors, there was only the hill of mourning. That was what the villagers once called it. A high ridge shrouded in mist and silence, where no crops grew and no animals grazed. It was land soaked in memory and mourning, feared not for what had happened there, but for what had been buried and never allowed to die. The legend of Camolo was ancient, so old that even the griots, the traveling storytellers who kept the oral histories of the people, only spoke his name in hushed tones beside firelight. Camolo was not a man, nor was he a spirit in the ordinary sense. He was something in between. A high priest who had once ruled over a forgotten tribe that worshipped the voice beneath the earth, a deity not of light or goodness, but of hunger, silence, and sacrifice. This god, they believed, dwelled deep within the soil and required offerings not of blood, but of potential, the brightest, the cleverest, the most promising among their youth. Camolo's tribe was powerful and feared, their rituals older than written language. It is said that the tribe never lost a war, never faced drought or disease, and lived longer than their neighboring clans, but their fortune came with a price. Every 7 moons, a girl from the tribe was chosen, always young, always gifted, always beloved. She would be taken to the shrine at the center of the hill and laid upon the black stone altar. Her spirit would be offered to the voice beneath, and her body lowered into the soil where the roots of ancient trees would consume her slowly, wrapping her like a cocoon. But over time, the people began to resist. Mothers hid their daughters, fathers begged for mercy, and so Camolo's rituals grew darker. He developed a way to mark girls at birth with invisible sigils, branding their souls with a call only the earth could hear. Even when families fled, the girls would return at the appointed time, eyes glazed, lips whispering the ancient name of the god who waited beneath the ground. But when the tribe finally rose against Camolo, it was too late. By then, he had become something otherworldly, neither living nor dead. His flesh was stone, his blood root sap. The earth obeyed him. The rebellion ended in fire and ash. The survivors tried to seal the shrine, to bury the name of Kemolo and plant trees over the place where blood had soaked the soil for centuries. He called it cursed and built villages far from its reach. For generations, no one went near the hill. Even the animals avoided it. But the earth remembers. Centuries later, when colonial explorers and missionaries stumbled upon the fertile land of the Forgotten Hill, they saw only potential, a high plateau perfect for an educational institution. The documents claim it was a visionary idea, a boarding school for girls, a safe haven for gifted young women from across the continent. Bricks were laid, walls raised, and a name was chosen, Marula, after the tree of memory and spirit. What they didn't realize, or perhaps chose to ignore, was that by digging the foundation of their shining academy, they broke the seal on something buried too deep for their maps or minds to comprehend. The first batch of builders complained of nightmares. Tools vanished, foundations cracked, and several laborers went missing, never found. One worker reportedly clawed his own eyes out after seeing something crawl out of the earth during a night shift. But progress demanded sacrifice, and soon the school was completed. But it was never truly a school. It was a vessel. The altar of Kemolo still exists, buried beneath the chapel where students are forbidden to enter. The walls are built with stones carved from the ruins of the shrine. The very layout of the school mirrors the sigil of offering once etched into the hill by Kemolo's hand. And though no teacher ever speaks of it, the curse lives on, subtle, invisible, but pulsing beneath every tile, every hallway, every whisper of wind through the trees. The curse doesn't strike at random. It selects. It calls. It marks certain girls. Those with brilliance, with inner fire, with destiny. It begins slowly, in dreams, in strange memories that don't belong, in the humming sound of roots shifting below their feet. Then come the changes, phantom hands brushing against their backs, voices whispering in dead languages, lights flickering even when no storm has passed. The students call it the pole. It's an unspoken fear, a sensation like being watched not by eyes, but by the very ground. And those who feel it know they don't have long. But it isn't just the students who are affected. Some of the faculty have grown old without aging. Others walk the halls with shadows that move independently of their bodies. A few were never meant to be teachers at all. They are watchers, descendants of Kemolo's lost tribe, keeping the ritual alive in silence, ensuring the offerings continue. Over time, the curse of Kemolo has learned to adapt. No longer satisfied with random selection, it now seeks cycles. It returns with every generation of students, with every blood moon, with every tear dropped in fear. The school feeds it, not with food, but with fear, with secrets, with souls. And it has grown clever. It wears the face of tradition, hides in the folds of uniforms, whispers through textbooks and prayer hymns. There are records hidden beneath the floorboards of the library, revealing how every 7 years the disappearances increase, how the school's top performers vanish without trace, how the trees bloom with impossible fruit afterward. One letter written in shaking hand by a former student reads, Molo is not dead. He waits beneath the roots. We are the fruit. We are the offering. No matter how modern the school becomes, how many renovations are made, how many policies change, the curse remains unchanged. It was never about superstition. It was about design, a sacred pattern that predates stone and language, a hunger that only knows one law. The brightest must feed the dark. Amina had begun to understand the truth not with her mind, but with her soul. Each journal she uncovered, each whisper in the hall, each name scratched off the hidden roster peeled back another layer of the haunting truth. Marula Girls Academy was never meant to be a sanctuary for brilliance. It was a sieve for sacrifice, a net designed to catch the brightest and most defiant stars and drown them in silence. And now she was next. It started with the dreams. Not ordinary nightmares, but surreal, shattering glimpses into a world buried beneath reality. Amina would find herself floating through endless hallways with no end, each wall pulsing with veins of light that dimmed as she passed. In some dreams, the missing girls stood at the end of the corridor, their faces veiled in shadow, their mouths moving but producing no sound, only sorrow. In others, she wandered barefoot through the chapel at night, drawn by a soundless melody that seeped up from the cracked marble tiles. The dreams always ended the same way, She would kneel before the black stone altar, raise her hands in surrender, and feel the roots of something ancient wrap around her wrist. The real horror was waking up with soil under her fingernails and bruises in the shape of vines on her arms. But escape was not as simple as running. The school grounds were warded, not by gates or walls, but by the curse itself. Girls who tried to flee would find themselves lost in an ever-repeating maze of paths, trees rearranging, buildings reshuffling like a living organism that refused to let go. Some went mad from it. One girl ran for hours only to end up in the headmistress's office, collapsed and screaming in languages she had never learned. Another drowned in the courtyard well without water. Amina knew that escape would require more than footsteps. It would demand something deeper, something personal. And it was during one of her secret library explorations that she found the passage that changed everything. The earth will not part without offering. The gate will not open without grief. At first, she didn't understand, but then she realized, to escape the curse, you had to feed it something equal in weight to a soul. The curse did not just devour girls. It devoured meaning, hope, connection. It thrived on sacrifice, but not just of the physical body. It craved the loss of love, of trust, of innocence. It wanted something you would never get back. Amina's only family was her younger sister Zubada, who lived in a far-off village and wrote to her every week. Their bond was sacred. She had raised Zubada after their parents died, and every letter she received reminded her of who she was before Marilla, the big sister, the protector, the only light in Zubada's young world. That bond was her anchor, her reason to survive, her hope. And the curse knew it. The dreams began to shift. Zubada appeared in them now, standing behind the altar, her voice echoing with sorrow. "Leave me, Amina. If you leave me too." Amina would wake choking on her own sobs, her sister's name trapped in her throat like a thorn. One morning, she found Zubada's letters burnt to ash in her drawer, without fire. No one admitted to it. Her last connection to the outside world was dissolving, but Amina refused to give in. She remembered the old journal pages, the ones that hinted at a ritual of exchange. One passage read, "A heart for a door, a bond for a break. One must be given that another may walk free." It became clear, if Amina wished to escape the curse's grasp, she would have to offer her bond with Zubeda, not her life, but the emotional cord that tied them. It meant more than forgetting. It meant choosing to sever the spiritual connection, to become emotionally dead to the only person who had kept her human. She performed the ritual beneath the laundry room at midnight, guided by scraps of broken language, a braid of Zubeda's hair, and a stolen candle from the chapel. She whispered every memory aloud. Zubeda's giggles, her first steps, the mangoes they used to pick, and with each memory, the roots of the earth writhed around her like snakes. She choked on the words, not from lack of breath, but from the feeling of her heart breaking inward. As the final word left her lips, a gust of wind blew through the underground chamber, and the ground cracked open. A staircase appeared, winding into darkness, pulsing with the faint glow of something old, the way out, but it came at a price. From that night forward, Amina never remembered her sister's name, not her face, not her voice. The letters in her mind were erased like chalk in rain. Her chest carried a hollow ache she could not name, but she knew someone had been there once. And still the path did not grow easy. The curse, while momentarily sated, was always watching, always shifting. It knew she had broken a part of herself to slip through its grasp. And it did not like to be defied. Every step toward freedom came with hallucinations, voices in the walls, shadows pulling at her feet. But her soul had been cut, and the blood offered was enough to open doors no other girl had reached in decades. But Amina was not the only one who had known sacrifice. Others had tried. Others had given things just as precious. And their memories, their sorrow, their broken pieces clung to the very air, guiding her through hidden chambers and weeping walls as she moved further away from the school that still called out for her blood. She didn't run. She bled meaning instead. And the deeper she went, the more she felt the weight of what she had left behind. Amina had always believed that the worst truth one could face was death. But she would come to learn that there are fates far more devastating than death. Reality is so deep and twisted they do not kill the body, but shatter the self. It wasn't until she reached the lowest chamber beneath Marula Girls Academy that the veil was fully lifted and the haunting truth revealed itself, not in words or logic, but in pure, soul-consuming understanding. The path had not been straight. It had spiraled downward like a serpent, each step further from the light. The walls around her had transformed into something organic, not brick or stone, but moist and veined like the inside of a living thing. Her breath grew shallow. Time stretched unnaturally. Sounds from the world above ceased. It was as though she were sinking into the memory of the land itself, a memory that pulsed and bled. At the bottom, past the layers of carved-out soil and fossilized offerings, Amina entered the heart room, a circular chamber, pulsing faintly with reddish light that came from the walls themselves. It smelled of earth, rot, and something sweet like overripe fruit. At its center stood the black altar, not the replica in the chapel above, but the original, uncarved and unpolished, old enough to predate language. It was there that she finally saw them, the missing girls, not as corpses or ghosts, but as roots. The revelation didn't come in flashes. It unfolded slowly, horrifyingly, until it consumed her entire sense of self. From the altar extended thousands of hair-like roots, weaving into the walls across the ground and even into the air. These weren't roots from trees. They were the remnants of souls, twisted, stretched, and tangled, each one humming with a faint, mournful vibration. And as Amina reached out to one, her hand shaking, she was flooded with visions, memories that were not hers. She saw Anea, the chemistry genius from 2 years ago, laughing in the science lab, only to later cry silently in her dorm, sensing she was being watched by something that moved in the cracks of the ceiling. She saw Thandi, who played violin so beautifully that birds used to gather on her windowsill, slowly go mad, carving symbols into her skin with a tuning fork. She saw Faiza, who had won the regional debate tournament, dragged through her dreams night after night into a pit where no sound could escape. Each of them had been chosen. Not randomly, not coincidentally. Their brilliance, their light had been cataloged, measured, and harvested. The school didn't just accept the best. It was designed to lure them in, to gather a harvest of brilliance to feed the ancient curse, to keep Kemolo dormant and the voice beneath satisfied. But that was only the beginning. Amina staggered back from the roots, her breath ragged, her heart pounding. She looked down and saw that her own feet were sinking into the earth. The soil pulsed around her ankles, as though trying to graft her into the living network. She wasn't just a survivor. She was meant to be the next conduit, not a sacrifice, but a core, a beacon of light turned into a power source for the darkness beneath. That's why the dreams had intensified, why the letters burned, why the teachers had watched her with pity rather than discipline. The curse didn't just choose its victims. It cultivated them, groomed them, broke them gently over time until their resistance collapsed and they surrendered willingly, unknowingly, to the weight of inevitability. The haunting part was not that the girls had been taken. It was that they had been preserved. They hadn't died, not entirely. Their essence had been woven into the foundation of the academy, forming a living consciousness beneath the school, a prison of potential brilliance twisted into agony, light bent into servitude. And they remembered every test they passed, every friend they made, every time they begged to be saved and no one came. It echoed through the roots like a heartbeat, anguish layered upon anguish, begging not for release but for recognition. And now, Amina could hear them. They whispered her name in 100 voices. They didn't want her to flee. They wanted her to stay, to lead, to replace the old with something new. They showed her visions of herself, not as a prisoner, but as a warden. The curse had once belonged to Kemolo, but power was transferable. The system could be rewritten, but only by someone willing to give up everything that made her human and become the heart of the network herself. Not dead, not alive, eternal. That was the true revelation. The curse did not demand death. It demanded purpose. It demanded understanding. It fed not on flesh, but on the dreams of the gifted, the purest form of potential energy. It had evolved beyond Kemolo's primitive rituals. Now it ran on guilt, memory, sacrifice, and choice. She saw herself at the altar, not chained, but standing willingly, arms open, accepting, becoming. And in that moment, Amina finally understood the most terrible thing of all. The school would never stop taking, because it had never been forced to give.